And you've mentioned a couple times now the fact that there's a few different foods in there: polyphenols, resistant starch, and fiber, which we could further break down into soluble, insoluble. Talk about the differences there and if there's any overlap as foods for the microbiome. And why I want to get into that, if somebody's missing one of those, can they make up for it in a different area? Or do they need all of those every day?
Okay, so I would start in explaining this. Thank you for that question by talking about my mindset as I was formulating the supplement and the scientific justification for this product. And then I want to expand that to include nutrition because to me, the main source of these things actually should be our diet. It should not be a supplement. So the what we know is that each of these is a different class of prebiotic. Prebiotic, PRE, is food for the microbiome. The microbes actually metabolize it. They break it down, transform it, it becomes different. And then the microbes grow as a result of this. And they typically will release something called postbiotics. So, and the postbiotics are the chemicals produced by the microbiome that have beneficial effects on our body. The absolute classic postbiotic are the short chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate, and propionate. And we get those when the microbiome consumes fiber, specifically and typically soluble fiber. Soluble fiber stops being soluble fiber, microbes grow, and they release these short chain fatty acids that have effects right there in the gut and also throughout the entire body, like literally all the way into our brain. Okay. Well, it turns out that fiber isn't the only way to produce these short chain fatty acids. It turns out that resistant starch actually allows us to produce as much or even more. And resistant starch is conceptually similar to soluble fiber, but it's not fiber, it's starch. But we call it resistant starch because we don't have the enzymes to digest it. So it arrives to the colon intact, and then the microbes digest it to produce short chain fatty acids. The third form of prebiotic are the polyphenols. Polyphenols are quite different than fiber and resistant starch, and they don't get directly turned into short chain fatty acids. Instead, polyphenols are these, you may hear them described as antioxidant compounds. People who talk about the benefits of wine, they're talking about resveratrol. Resveratrol is a polyphenol. The colors in our food, the reason why blueberries are blue and cherries are red and orange is orange is because of polyphenols. They're responsible for those colors. And there are at least 8,000 unique polyphenols that exist. They're found in plant-based foods. And the fascinating thing is that our body does not absorb them for the most part. 90 to 95% of polyphenols will actually make their way to the microbiome. And then our microbes activate them. And in activating, we get the benefits. So when people talk about how great resveratrol is, or quercetin, or any other of these class of chemicals, I just want people to hear and understand the reason why they're good is because of the microbiome. So what happens with polyphenols, though, is that they actually prime the microbiome. The microbiome becomes shaped in a way because it does change the microbiome. The microbiome, in response to the polyphenols, gets shaped in a way where it is designed to efficiently produce short chain fatty acids. So when you combine these things, you're creating a synergistic effect. The fiber and the resistant starches will ultimately turn into short chain fatty acids. And the polyphenols are priming the microbiome to basically efficiently do that process and manufacture those short chain fatty acids. All right, so that's the concept behind the supplement daily microbiome nutrition. But let me zoom out. We should not be getting most of our fiber or resistant starch or polyphenols from supplements. We should get them in our diet. And the way in which we do this is quite simply, these are all plant-based nutrients. So we get them by eating a diverse range of plant-based foods: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, seeds, nuts, and legumes. And the variety is the key because, and I believe that you and I discussed this back in our original episode, but I want to bring it forward again because it's so important. We talked about the power of fermented food, and now I'm going to add another concept for nutrition, which is the power of variety in our diet. Different foods have different nutrients that can support and nurture a healthier gut microbiome. So we need to add more variety to our diet. So I think the way that I approach these general issues, Jesse, is like I want to optimize my diet. I'm teaching some of the concepts that I personally follow in my life, some of the concepts that I have shared with patients through the years. I support that with a healthy lifestyle that includes these circadian things and good sleep and exercise and human connection. And then there's this place where, to me, there's a role where supplements allow me to achieve things that I would not be able to achieve with my diet and my lifestyle alone. I can take it to a higher level.
Sticking with the diet piece, we know there's these 3 different categories now of food for the microbiome. You mentioned the key is diversity, which is your golden rule, eating diverse. In a practical sense, though, if somebody, because left there, that's pretty arbitrary, how do we make sure on a regular basis we're getting enough diversity to get enough of each of these 3 nutrients to facilitate an optimal microbiome?
Okay. If you go to your store and you eat things that come in a package from the middle of the store and it says plant-based, that's not the type of food that we're here talking about. That is an ultra processed food, and they're just playing you with their marketing strategy. What I'm talking about is a food where you don't need an ingredient list. It's just real. And I'm a big believer that there are many forms of a healthy diet, not just one. Much like you have a unique microbiome, and so do I, and so does the listener at home. There are many forms of a healthy diet. But I'm also of the belief that eating plants is one of the core strategies for supporting the microbiome and then achieving optimal health. And so we think about varieties of different plants within the diet. And to benchmark this, in the study that brought this concept forward for the first time, it was called the American Gut Project. But by the way, it wasn't just Americans, it was an international study. In that study, the researchers, they asked the question, what is the most powerful thing that a person can do in order to have a healthier gut? And by healthier gut, I mean more diversity within the gut. And the answer to the question was eat 30 different plants per week. That was the key. 30 different plants per week. Now, what counts as a plant? All fruit, all vegetables. Now, I want people to hear me. If you're eating this way, your diet should not just be those 2 things. And it should not just be salads. All right. Because whole grains and legumes and seeds and nuts, and I'm going to throw mushrooms in there, and herbs and spices, these all count. Now, our food system does not want you to eat this way. Our food system wants to consolidate into monocrops: wheat, corn, and soy. If they had their way, that's all you would eat. If I have my way, can you consume some wheat, corn, and soy? Sure, the healthy kinds. But what I want you to eat is I want you to walk into your supermarket and think about, hey, what am I going to put into that pasta sauce so it's not just sauce? Hey, if I'm making a bowl of soup or chili, what can I throw in there that's going to add more variety, right? If I'm making a salad, what are the things that I can throw in there? I just want you to think about this when you're in the supermarket. And then I want that to carry into the kitchen. And then ultimately, when you're at the plate, when you're at the dinner table and you're building your plate, diversity of plants, varieties of plants, how many can you get in there? And a simple way to do this, Jesse, from my perspective, and this is something that I'll do with my kids because it's fun, is we play a game and we count plant points. And we'll throw a sheet of paper up on the refrigerator and you get 1 point for every single plant in your meal. And you see who can get the most. So this is the way that you approach this. And I don't want anyone to feel bad if they're less than 30. I probably started off 10 years ago eating 6. So I just want you to see this direction and start to walk in this direction.
All right, so it's obvious your enthusiasm for plants and getting the diversity on a regular basis. From the other end of the spectrum, how do you look at plant toxins? Oxalates, phytates, lectins like gluten. Are you mindful of those and limiting them, or are there certain ones that you don't consume?
It's a good question. I tend to not share tremendous concern with those things. And because I think that sometimes the way that our body feels is misunderstood. So let me sort of unpack that for a quick moment. When people eat um, beans, if you have underlying gut issues, especially if you have constipation, you may not feel well. And there's a clear-cut reason for this, which is that when you start increasing these high fiber, high resistant starch, high polyphenol foods, which by the way, beans and whole grains, those are like the most dense when it comes to fiber and resistant starches. When you start increasing them, you don't have the ability to digest that yourself. You are 100% reliant on your microbiome to do that for you. And people that have not been eating those foods, it is hard to change and start eating them. It is hard. The reason why is because your gut microbes are not designed to do this implicitly. They have to be taught. So you have to make the decision that you want to train your gut in order to process and digest these foods that perhaps you have not been eating. And if you haven't been eating them, you shouldn't feel bad. That's 95% of people out there. It's the vast majority of people. But if you make the decision after listening to this podcast, you know what? I want to give this a try. And I want to just see where it goes and follow these ideas that Dr. B has. I would encourage you, please don't make a radical change. Please don't go and eat 5-bean chili because I said that it was healthy. I want you to start low and go slow. That's the key. So when you introduce these foods, I want to use a framework that's conceptually similar to exercise, which is that your gut is capable of doing whatever it is that you've been training it to do. And if you haven't been eating beans, then that is conceptually similar to not being a runner and getting started on a training program. And when you do that and you try to make yourself into a runner, you can do this, but you have to start with short runs and the amount that your body can handle. And then you have to recover from that. And then when you're recovered, you run a little bit further. The same is true with our diet. If we have food like these plant-based foods that people may struggle to process and digest, it's because your gut microbiome is not adapted to them because you haven't been eating this way. And so when you introduce them, you have to, much like exercise, much like going to the gym, start with an amount that you can handle, which may not be much, and then allow your body to adapt. And then you can slowly increase over time. That's the way that I would approach that.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
I'm just going to say, this has been a game changer for me. I always get my morning sunlight by 9 o'clock. Through that light exposure, you are producing serotonin in the gut, which helps to stimulate your gut motility, which is a healthy gut, is going to ultimately shape your gut.